Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to your AEW Dynamite post-show, man. And there is a lot to talk about in today's episode. We're going to break down all the matches, break down some of the segments that happened last night between Ospreay, Omega. We had a little interaction also between Willow Nightingale and Mercedes Moné. We'll talk about that in today's episode as well, man. But before I even get a full breakdown of the show, I want to give you guys my thoughts of last night's show, the direction we're going here between Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, and obviously the direction that we're going into All In. So I want to start with the elephant in the room, and I want to talk about Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega's situation going into All In. First and foremost, I know there's going to be a lot of people out here that are going to disagree with this match. They don't want to see it. It doesn't make sense, and a lot of people are just up in arms about this match. First and foremost, I will say this. The Kenny Omega match versus Will Ospreay taking place at All In, do I think it's going to be a bad match? No. I think both these guys are going to tear the house down. I think the major frustration that people have here with this matchup is a couple things. Number one, AEW is in a situation, in my opinion, where you're trying to basically turn chicken shit into chicken salad. And what I mean by that is that you're trying to take a situation where you're making Will Ospreay the biggest babyface of the company, and then taking Kenny Omega, who was at one time one of the biggest baby faces as well in the company, and turning Kenny Omega heel, or have heel tendencies going into this matchup here with Will Ospreay. I think the issue with this is you're trying to force an agenda here with Kenny Omega that you already had. And what I mean by that is MJF. I genuinely believe, and I said this a while back ago, and I'm going to say it here today, that I think AEW and Tony Khan dropped the fucking ball when it pertains to MJF going into All In and defending the AEW World title against Will Ospreay. The fact of the matter is, man, when we had this matchup here between MJF and Kenny Omega at Beach Break for the AEW World title, this should have been something where MJF should have retained that AEW World title and kept that title going into All In. The money match to make was Ospreay versus MJF. Because at the end of the day, while you're trying to force this agenda with Kenny Omega turning heel, you already had it organically with MJF. MJF, I mean, he's probably the biggest heel in the business right now. And the way that he comes off as a heel, he comes off as this egotistical prick, this asshole. It just comes off fluently for MJF, where Kenny Omega, they're trying to force his agenda of having him kind of turn heel. Last night he put Will Ospreay through a table, calling, Ospreay an asshole, calling Ospreay a prick, everything else that Kenny Omega was trying to do, whatever he could possibly to become a heel. And again, it's this whole agenda of turning chicken shit into chicken salad. Well, if you're looking at Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay's situation, for Kenny Omega, it's basically taking chicken shit back to chicken shit. Nothing's going to change, bro. And I think the fact of the matter is that Tony Khan and AEW are trying to force feed this agenda with Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. A lot of people will go back. It's been, weeks, months. Oh, maybe MJF's hurt. Maybe he's, needs to take some time off. MJF is not hurt. Now, he was filming a movie, but he is not hurt. So my thing is, when you look back at Beach Break, and you had that AEW title defense between MJF and Kenny Omega, not for nothing, man. I don't think. Yes, Kenny Omega winning the title, I guess, obviously is going to benefit Kenny Omega. As far as storyline progression, which AEW seemingly has the most impossible time trying to create any kind of captivating storylines, MJF beating Kenny Omega just made more sense going into All In, where he knew he was going to face Will Ospreay going into Wembley Stadium. Now, I don't know if this is something where there's some behind-the-scenes, politicking going on, where Will Ospreay had won the Owen, and maybe Ospreay had confronted Tony Khan and said, hey, I really want to face off against Kenny Omega. I think that match makes the most sense. If that's the case, then I don't know what the hell Will Ospreay's thinking. The money match to make was between MJF and Will Ospreay at Wembley Stadium, which 9 times out of 10, if you think about it, more than likely, Will Ospreay should go over and become the new AEW World Champion being at Wembley Stadium. I mean, it's almost like a shoo-in at this point for Will Ospreay to become the new AEW World Champion. Now we have a situation now where you look at someone like MJF, who was a former AEW World Champion, who's now going to be at All In, and competing at All In a Casino Gauntlet match, where if MJF does somehow win that Casino Gauntlet match, he becomes a new number one contender for the AEW World title. Which MJF has stated multiple times now that he wants to be in the main event of All In. He wants to have the AEW World title match against Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega at All In. So my thing is how is this? I feel like they're going to back themselves into a corner with this MJF, Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega situation. And the problem is, too, and I don't think a lot of people are thinking about this, is what happens after All In? Where do we go from next? Now, some people could say, well, obviously if MJF wins the Casino Gauntlet, we're going to get MJF versus Will Ospreay at All Out in September. Which, again, is a great match. But we're talking about All In. You guys can't honestly sit here and tell me that the build-up that we've gotten so far going into All In, which now All In's roughly about, 11 to 10 days from now, feels like an All-In build. All In is AEW's biggest show of the year. It is their WrestleMania. It is the biggest show of the year for AEW. I mean, right now on paper, I believe they have about roughly 40,000 and some change seats sold already for this show. Already. And we're 11 days out. Or 10 days out. To me, the money match to make was MJF versus Will Ospreay. I know some people, it might be a hot take for a lot of people. Oh, man, I can't believe you could say that about Kenny Omega. But, bro, at the end of the day, Kenny Omega becoming AEW World Champion does what? I mean, are we talking about Kenny Omega being at the tail end of his career? And this is why Tony Khan thought it was a great idea to crown Kenny Omega AEW World Champion. Because I'm going to be honest, bro, I can give a shit less about this Ospreay and Kenny Omega match. Is it going to be a good match? Sure. But where's the fucking storyline? Where is the story? You're forcing an agenda right now, trying to do whatever you can to have Kenny Omega have heel tendencies over the next, 10 days until we get to AEW's All In. Knowing that we have another Dynamite next week. And then you see Kenny Omega put Will Ospreay through a table last night for what? I mean, Christ, the entire show last night felt like the entire AEW Dynamite episode last night was all about the Don Callis family. And that's the other thing that confuses the shit out of me with this whole Don Callis situation. You know, Kenny Omega's talking about Ospreay being around Don Callis and Don Callis being around Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega has not been a part of anything with Don Callis in probably over a year. Probably the same thing for Will Ospreay, if not longer. So I don't know how Don Callis is somehow incorporated into this situation here between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. I mean, Christ, bro, you had multiple six-man tag team matches last night when it was the Bucks teaming up with Omega to take on the Don Callis family. Then you had Ospreay and United Empire also taking on members of the Don Callis family. Andrade showed up. You had Fletcher. You had Takeshita show up. Okada. I felt like the entire night last night was based around Don Callis and the Don Callis family. I don't know how Don Callis somehow is incorporated into this storyline between Omega and Ospreay. There's no allegiance there. I mean, if you look at Ospreay, the last time he was with the stable was the Death Riders. Since he came back from neck injury. And even before that, he was still involved with the Death Riders. I mean, the Death Riders pretty much wrote him off television because he had to get neck surgery. So again, I don't know how Don Callis is somehow incorporated into this shit between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. I really don't. I don't get it at all. You know, and if you keep playing back the same old shit, and it's like, bro, what the fuck are we doing here? What are we doing? There's no sense of direction. There's no storyline. You're forcing an agenda down our throats with Kenny Omega having heel tendencies. When not for nothing, bro, you had an organic heel in MJF. MJF should have had that belt and carried that belt until we got into All In. And main evented All In. Ospreay versus MJF. To me, it's more appealing to see that than it is Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay, man. And again, I don't know if there's some kind of backstage politicking going on. Maybe Ospreay said something to Tony Khan, or, hey, I wanted to face Kenny Omega at, All In. I mean, there was a, that sit down with Renee between Ospreay and Kenny Omega, and Ospreay said himself that, it's been a 10-year chase to try to dethrone Kenny Omega. 10-year chase to dethrone Kenny Omega, which we'll get into later on in the show today. But it's just like, damn, bro, like you guys could have struck the iron when the iron's hot with MJF. There was no reason for him to drop the belt to Kenny Omega at Beach Break. Not at all. Not at all. And not for nothing, I mean, what does it do for MJF? You put this guy in a Casino Gauntlet match, and if he wins it, he becomes a new number one contender for the AEW World title? Come on, man. Come on. That's the best we got for MJF. Like, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing? Seriously. For a company that is scared Tony Khan is scared to goddamn death to write any kind of solid storyline. You can't convince me otherwise, bro. You're trying to convince me on Kenny Omega being a heel going into this matchup against Will Ospreay at All In roughly about 10 days from now. Because before it was like, oh, hey, man, we're the best of buds, all this other shit. And now you're slowly trying to turn Kenny Omega heel. It's not organic. You had that with MJF, and you guys dropped the fucking ball with that. And now you're trying to turn chicken shit into chicken salad. And guess what? It ain't fucking working. It's not working. And I'm gonna tell you all, I'm gonna tell you guys this right now, man. The build going into All In, it just does not feel like an All In build. It feels like this build up is towards another just random pay-per-view, not All In at all. This is your biggest show of the calendar year, and I feel like as far as storyline progression, it's not even there. It's very lackadaisical. You see Darby Allin and Kevin Knight last night. Kevin Knight's in the ring. He calls out Darby Allin. Darby Allin's standing on the stage. And here we are, right back to the old Rolodex for WWE. And Tony Khan pulls out a page out of WWE's playbook and had Darby Allin go through the same shit that Jeff Hardy went through with the pyro incident. Literally, the same shit. And I said this then, and I'm going to say the same shit now. There was no reason to book that Kevin Knight versus Darby Allin match when we had it. They should have waited until we got to All In. Or hopefully the title reign comes to an end for Kevin Knight, to be honest with you. Or is this something because of what happened last night, and Kevin Knight was talking shit to Steve Borden? Is this something where Darby is going to somehow incorporate Steve Borden into a match against Kevin Knight? Because from what I was told, it looks like Steve Borden has already signed a contract with AEW, Sting's son. Which we'll talk about that in today's episode as well. But, again, this is something that you guys are already replaying that already happened already. Now you're trying to make it, a Falls Count Anywhere match? No disqualification? Come on, man. I don't know, folks. I just don't get it, man. And it's not just me. There's so many other people out here that are doing this, man, when it pertains to AEW, that it's hard not to sound like a broken record because it's the same shit, rinse and repeat every single fucking week. Nothing makes sense. Seriously, and I don't know if it's from Tony Khan. I don't know if whatever writing team that he has with the AEW, I don't know who's back there writing this shit. But, bro, literally, wake up and smell the fucking Folgers, man. Seriously. You had MJF. You feed the hot hand. And that's the hot hand right now. I can give a shit less about Kenny Omega right now. Especially him being AEW World Champion. I'm sorry. And the fact of the matter is we know there's some more free agents on the way to AEW. We know for a fact that they're trying to set up, eventually at some point, a storyline here with Xavier Woods and Kofi and the Bucks and Kenny Omega. That's been teased, since that gaming convention when it was on a part of the Being the Elite back in the day. The Bucks and Kenny Omega have been waiting for years to work with the likes of the New Day. And they are on their way to AEW probably roughly in about 10 days, which we'll talk about that and how I think the New Day is going to be incorporated into AEW and especially All In. We'll talk about that in today's episode as well. But I don't know, man. I just feel like after watching Dynamite last night, did I think the episode was great? No, I didn't. There's no real true storyline progression. You got Adam Page, who's a current Trios champion, thrown out an open challenge, which we'll talk about that later on in today's episode as well, and who I think is going to answer that open challenge for All In. We had that. We saw the Don Callis family throughout the entire fucking night, man. From Doyle to Mark Davis, El Clone. They were in a six-man tag team match. And then you had Brian Cage, Lance Archer, and Rocky Romero in a six-man tag team matchup. You hear from Kyle Fletcher. You see Takeshita. You hear from Okada. I feel like the entire goddamn night was literally AEW presents the Don Callis family. That's what it fucking felt like to me. And it was just god-awful boring. Boring. And my thing is this, bro, not for nothing, a little off-topic subject here, but where the hell is Sabin and Shelley? The Motor City Machine Guns. Why are they not on Dynamite? Why are they not having a match? I don't think they even had a match on Collision yet, from what I understand. Where the hell was Sabin and Shelley? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just fucking frustrating, to be honest with you. And it gets to a point, man, where I try my best to try to find a positive out of this show, man, but I am struggling trying to find something that came out of the show. There were certain things that I didn't mind seeing. I thought the backstage segment there between Steve Borden and Kevin Knight is very telling. I know Darby Allin has been training with Steve Borden, who was Sting's son. I think he had signed a contract with AEW. I'm all for it, man. I mean, he looks exactly like Sting in Sting's younger days. If they're willing to push this guy as the next top guy, another superstar like they did for Kevin Knight, and they're willing to green light Steve Borden to put him on AEW Dynamite and give him some in-ring time on television, I'm not against it. I mean, Darby Allin, even laying on that stretcher, was telling Borden, hey, not yet, not yet. Pretty much telling me that there is going to be a time that we're going to see Steve Borden compete on AEW television. I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. So I thought that was intriguing. The back and forth between Willow and Monet we'll get into today on today's episode. I thought that was good as well, and especially the sit-down between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. I thought that sit-down alone was probably the best thing they've done so far in this storyline between Ospreay and Omega, which was that sit-down last night between them two and Renee for the build-up for All In, which we'll talk about in today's episode. But like I said, man, for the past few weeks, it's like, I would say this, they had a really good show in Arena Mexico. I thought that was a great show, a lot of good wrestling, a lot of, action-packed wrestling in the ring, and the crowd was just absolutely phenomenal at Arena Mexico, man. They absolutely killed it. But after that show at Grand Slam Mexico, bro, it's been a slow burn for AEW Dynamite. And 9 times out of 10, usually when they're out of a pay-per-view, that following Dynamite, those post-Dynamites, past pay-per-views, man, are usually brutal as all hell. So, but like I said, man, we're going to talk about the show. We're going to go in depth about the show and what went down last night and give you guys my thoughts about it as well. So, but let's get into the night. We start off the night with a 6-man tag team matchup. It is Will Ospreay teaming up with the United Empire, taking on Don Callis family members Lance Archer, Brian Cage, and Rocky Romero. Now, I thought it was a decent match. There was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams, with Ospreay quickly hitting an enziguri in the middle of the ring. Henare and Archer both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Ospreay and the United Empire keeping the pace of the match. Cage then hits a jumping knee strike. Henare then hits a German suplex on Archer in the middle of the ring. Ospreay then hits a handspring Pele kick, followed by Ospreay hitting a springboard forearm strike for a near fall. Ospreay then follows it up by hitting a Poison Rana and a Hidden Blade, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Will Ospreay and the United Empire. Hats off to Ospreay and the United Empire for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we hear from AEW International Champion Kyle Fletcher. Fletcher comes out to the ring, grabs a microphone. Fletcher says, "We are in the most greatest AEW International title reign of all time." Fletcher said that there is no reason that title reign should end at All In. Fletcher then talks about Don Callis and says that he trusts Don. Fletcher says Okada needs to know his role, though, in all this, and to make sure that Fletcher retains the international title at All In. Fletcher says the one thing him and Okada have in common is the hate they have for Takeshita. Fletcher then goes ahead and mocks Takeshita, but Takeshita is here. Takeshita enters the ring. Fletcher and Takeshita then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Fletcher hitting a half and half on Takeshita, but Takeshita quickly gets up, hits a Blue Thunder Bomb on Fletcher. Takeshita then sends Fletcher into the turnbuckle and hits a Poison Rana. Takeshita then hits a Raging Fire in the middle of the ring on Fletcher, and Takeshita holds up the AEW International title. Now we have a triple threat match at All In for the international title between Fletcher, Okada, and Takeshita for the international title. Definitely looking forward to that match at All In. Moving on from that, we got a sit-down between number 1 contender Will Ospreay and AEW World Champion Kenny Omega. They have a sit-down with Renee. Renee talks about Ospreay and Omega meeting for the first time in PWG. Ospreay says he wanted to make an impression for Omega. Omega says that he was excited to face Ospreay at PWG and to see Ospreay. Omega talks about facing Ospreay in New Japan. Omega says that Ospreay was a completely different guy in New Japan. Omega says New Japan needed to sell tickets for Wrestle Kingdom 17, and Ospreay wasn't enough to sell tickets. Ospreay then talks about the struggles he had to face during the COVID pandemic era, while Omega didn't have to handle that type of pressure. Ospreay says that New Japan, during COVID, he was starving and taking pay cuts. Omega says, so what? We face the same struggles over here. Omega then talks about the history with Don Callis and winning championships. Omega says he wanted to warn Ospreay about the Don Callis family, but Ospreay says Omega showed no remorse. Omega then talks about Ospreay using Don Callis' family in their match at Forbidden Door. Ospreay says he faced a lot of backlash from the fans online for that match, and has dealt with it ever since. Omega says Ospreay is trying to do everything he can to get on his level. Renee then mentions diverticulitis, but Omega quickly says enough about the diverticulitis. Omega then asks Ospreay, are you a better wrestler since the neck injury and the surgery? Ospreay then talks about telling Omega not to give up on himself, but funny thing was, ever since he said that, you were gone. 4 weeks here, 4 weeks there. Ospreay says he wants to beat the best version of Omega at All In with no bullshit. Ospreay then follows it up by saying this match means everything to him, more than anything in life itself. Ospreay says it's been a 10-year chase on trying to beat Omega. Omega says at Wembley, in front of all your friends and family, they're going to see you once again fail. Omega says that no matter what, Ospreay still is one of the greatest to ever do it, but then says his boy might have a new hero after Wembley. And both guys were separated by AEW security. Some interesting stuff there between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. Moving on from that, we got a fatal 4-way matchup for the AEW TBS title. It is Shida versus Persephone versus Chris Statlander versus TBS champion Maya World. The match itself I thought was a decent match. It was a back and forth matchup with Shida and Chris Statlander both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Maya World hits a Hurricane Rana. Persephone hits a German suplex into a pin for a near fall. Shida then hits a running knee. Statlander hits a power bomb in the middle of the ring. She follows it up by hitting a lariat for a near fall, but Maya World hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and still TBS champion is Maya World. Hats off to Maya World for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have a Continental Cup quarterfinal matchup. It is Jay White taking on Continental Champion Jon Moxley. The match itself I thought was a good match, probably the best match of the night. It was a back-and-forth matchup with Moxley hitting a release German suplex on Jay White, but Jay gets up, hits a Hurricane Rana off the top rope. Jay White then applies a submission hold on Moxley, but the hold is broken. Jay then gets up, hits a half and half, followed by a flatliner on Moxley, but Moxley gets up, applies a bulldog choke on Jay White, but the hold is broken. Jay White then gets up, hits a superplex on Moxley, but Moxley then applies a sleeper hold on Jay White, but the hold is broken. Jay then hits a Blade Runner, but Moxley quickly rolls out of the ring. Moxley then applies another bulldog choke on Jay White, followed by a Death Rider for a near fall. Moxley then applies another sleeper hold, referee sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match is Jon Moxley. After the match, the Dogs attack Jay White. The Conglomeration are here, and also Gabe Kidd is here. Gabe attacks Orange Cassidy. Roderick Strong is here. Brodito and Page are here as well. Page mocks David Finlay. Ricochet and the Demand and Lethal Twist are here as well. Page says, we are the Trios champions. Page says there's no way in hell we're not going to be a part of Wembley. And Page then throws out an open challenge for the Trios titles at Wembley Stadium. Some interesting stuff from Adam Page, and we'll talk more about that at the end of today's show. Moving on from that, we have Jonathan Cruz in the middle of the ring. Grabs a microphone. Jonathan Cruz says he's here on MJF's behalf. Cruz then mocks Andrade, but Andrade is here. Andrade ends up beating the hell out of Jonathan Cruz, pins him for the 3, and Andrade gets the win. Andrade then mocks MJF and calls out MJF as well. MJF's music hits, but he's not here. Instead, he's shown on the Titantron at home. MJF then mocks the fans. MJF says that the next time you see me, you're going to be staring at the lights, up at the lights at Wembley. Andrade then hits a DM on Cruz and says, how you know. Some interesting stuff here between Andrade and MJF. Moving on from that, we have a Willow Nightingale and Mercedes Moné sit down. They're both being interviewed by Renee. Monet mocks Willow. Monet says she's going to end Willow at Wembley. Willow says that Monet spent too much time trying to be perfect. Willow says, I'm just me. I'm not trying to be perfect, but the fans watch me win the women's AEW women's title. Monet says that Willow is a bully. She says that Willow is going to lose her smile at Wembley. Monet then attacks Willow backstage. Monet and Willow both exchange in the middle of the ring with referees and AEW officials trying to break up a fight between Willow and Mercedes Monet. Some interesting stuff there between Willow and Mercedes Monet. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's another Continental Cup quarterfinal matchup. It is Nigel McGuinness taking on Don Callis family member Hechicero. Now, the match itself was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup with Hechicero going after the injured ankle of Nigel McGuinness, an injury that he sustained on Collision. Nigel tells Hechicero that he will take off his mask if he keeps going after the ankle. Hechicero then goes after the injured ankle anyway. Hechicero then hits a diving elbow for a near fall, with Hechicero keeping the pace of the match. Hechicero then applies a sleeper hold on Nigel, but the hold is broken. Nigel then hits a knee strike, followed by Nigel applying a submission hold on Hechicero. Referee sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match is Nigel McGuinness. Hats off to Nigel for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we hear from TNT champion Kevin Knight. Kevin Knight comes out to the ring. He is greeted by Tony Schiavone. Schiavone says Knight will have a match at Wembley in a Falls Count Anywhere match for the TNT title. Knight then kicks Tony Schiavone out of the ring. Knight says that he is the greatest TNT champion of all time. Knight then calls out Darby Allin. Darby is here. Knight says before you come to the ring, he asks for security to check Darby to make sure he doesn't have anything on him before he gets in the ring. Knight then mocks the crowd. Darby Allin then was standing on the stage. He ends up turning to the right side, and all of a sudden pyro goes off on the stage, hitting Darby Allin. Kevin Knight capitalizes on this by running up the stage and hitting a jumping knee on Darby Allin. Knight then throws Darby into the ring, grabs a chair. Knight hits a coast-to-coast using a chair on Darby Allin. After that, you can see Darby Allin being put on a stretcher, taken to the backstage area. Sting's son, Steve Borden, was ringside. Knight tells Borden to stay in his lane. And Knight says he wasn't ready anyway. Looks like we're going to get a matchup here between Darby Allin and Kevin Knight for the TNT Championship at All In. And moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's the main event of AEW Dynamite. It is the Don Callis family taking on Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Now, this match itself was a good match. There was a back-and-forth matchup with Omega and the Bucks keeping the pace of the match. Omega then hits a Snapdragon suplex, followed by the Bucks hitting a super kick. Omega hits a V-trigger, followed by a one-winged angel in the middle of the ring. Pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. After the match, the Don Callis family attack Omega and the Bucks. Copeland is here. Copeland attacks the Don Callis family. Cage is here, kind of looking reluctant to get in the ring. But Cage enters the ring. He attacks the Don Callis family. He goes for an unprettier, but Bucks accidentally hit a super kick, taking out Cage. After that, Will Ospreay is here. Everybody else clears out of the ring. Ospreay has a mic, says, "What do you got to say now?" Omega then tells security to escort Ospreay out of the building. Omega then mocks Ospreay. Ospreay says, "I'm going to kick the shit out of you," and rushes to the ring. Ospreay then attacks Omega. Omega hits a V-trigger and mocks Ospreay. Omega then was on the apron with Ospreay. Omega hits a one-wing angel, sending Ospreay through a table on the outside. Couple of things I want to talk about when it pertains to AEW Dynamite before I get the hell up out of here. So, like I mentioned earlier about Ospreay and Kenny Omega, it is what it is. Am I super excited about the match? No. Do I think it's going to be a good match? Yes. But the storyline in itself was the matchup between MJF and Will Ospreay. In my opinion. Might be a hot take and maybe very subjective to a lot of people, but that's just my opinion. Other things that happened as well. Mercedes Moné and Willow Nightingale, that backstage segment they had with Renee, I thought was great. Look, a lot of people can say what they want about Willow. I think Willow's done a fantastic job in AEW. I really have. I'm a big fan of Willow. I'm looking forward to this match between Willow and Moné for a couple reasons. One, Willow's done a hell of a job in her AEW career so far. And the other thing, too, is that this is the one title that has eluded Mercedes Moné ever since she's been a part of the AEW roster. Is Moné finally going to, cross over that threshold and finally become AEW Women's Champion? Or once again, is this going to be the title that eludes Mercedes Moné throughout her entire AEW career? It's going to be a very interesting matchup between Willow and Monet at All In. The other thing I want to talk about is the other segment that happened, the sit-down between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. That was the best push for a storyline, in my honest opinion, for this matchup that we've gotten so far. The fact that you can understand the history here between Omega and Ospreay from the time they met at PWG, the match they had at Wrestle Kingdom 17, or being part of New Japan Pro Wrestling, that build-up, that history that Ospreay and Kenny Omega's had. Ospreay saying that Omega was his hero, that he was chasing after Omega for over 10 years, trying to surpass Kenny Omega, to be the next big guy. You know, going through all the trials and tribulations during the pandemic era, when Ospreay, you know, he said that there was other guys like myself starving over there in New Japan, taking pay cuts. Omega saying, hey, we suffered the same stuff over here. You know, we had no fans and pay cuts and so on and so forth. And just the build and the history alone between Omega and Ospreay, that alone was probably the best part of the storyline that we've gotten so far between Ospreay and Kenny Omega. Just that sit down alone between Ospreay and Omega and Renee. I thought that was great. I thought it was great television. With that being said, yeah, I mean, I wish the matchup was between MJF and Will Ospreay, in my opinion. Call me crazy, but, you know, even seeing what Kenny Omega did at the end of the show last night by hitting that one-winged angel on Ospreay and putting him through a table. It's just like you're trying to force his agenda and trying to make Kenny Omega heel, and to me, it's just you're trying to turn chicken shit into chicken salad, and it just ain't working. It's just not working. You had a bona fide heel in MJF. Organic heel that just comes off like nothing. You know, Kenny Omega is trying to just force an agenda. It's just not there. It's not there. And I think a lot of people are having that same frustrations with this matchup. Lackadaisical build, and you're trying to give now Kenny Omega heel tendencies going into Wembley when we only have roughly about 10 days. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. The other thing I want to talk about is the open challenge that was thrown out by Adam Page. Now, a lot of people are trying to figure out who's going to answer this open challenge. Is it going to be Ricochet and the Man? Is it going to be, you know, the Dogs? Is it going to be, which team is it going to be? This is where I think we're going to go here. There's no way in hell you're going to keep Swerve Strickland off of AEW's Wembley show. There's no way. I personally, and I said something about this months ago. There has been these little Easter eggs with Prince Nana and Swerve, especially Prince Nana, where a couple times when you saw Prince Nana as of late, you saw this Mogul Embassy towels that he would walk around with. Now, we had not seen the Mogul Embassy stable since everything kind of fell apart and Swerve was left all on his own. But there are two gentlemen that are free agents that had been rumored to go to AEW and are most likely on their way to AEW. I think what we're going to get here is a possible team-up matchup here, a trios match between Brodito and Adam Page. Put the trios titles on the line against Swerve Strickland and the newly addition New Day, Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston, in a trios six-man tag team matchup for the trios titles. I think we're going to have Swerve Strickland team up with Woods and Kingston going up against Brodito and Adam Page at All In. It's been rumored, it's been speculated, and at this point, the writing is kind of on the wall where Swerve is going to have a matchup against Brodito and Page at Wembley. And he's going to be the guy that's going to answer that call. Now, who's going to join Swerve? Like I said, most likely it's going to be Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. And that place is going to erupt at Wembley. You know, there's a lot of fans out there that are big fans of the New Day, and they're going to get a huge pop at Wembley Stadium in about 10 days. And it's already been speculated that they're on their way over to AEW anyway. So I think that's what's going to end up happening. And we're going to see the debut of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, or Austin Creed, for that matter, make their debut at AEW at Wembley Stadium for All In. And it's going to be a huge pop for them, a huge ovation, and should be a hell of a moment for the fans watching and the fans there at Wembley Stadium for AEW All In. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. You know, Monet and Willow, I thought they did a great job. You know, and Darby Allin, I mean, look, for what it's worth, Darby Allin looks like he's going to get another shot at Kevin Knight for the TNT Championship. But I do think, and call me crazy, but I do think it's interesting that we did see Steve Borden. I know he's been working with Darby Allin behind the scenes and trying to train to become a pro wrestler. There's news that had came out recently that he had signed a contract with AEW, which I'm not shocked. I mean, look, you know, Tony Khan did a lot of things for Sting. And Sting, busted his ass when he was there. He's a company guy. And the fact that, his son now wants to become a wrestler. He's training with Darby Allin. Obviously, Sting's probably helping him out as well. He's in fantastic shape. Obviously, he's still young in the business. This could be something where they might flip the switch and actually have Borden a part of AEW television. Because that backstage segment, you could see Darby Allin on that stretcher. And Kevin Knight comes from the back stage area. He's talking shit. And he gets up close to Darby Allin on that stretcher and Steve Borden. And he's mouthing off to Darby Allin. And you can see that Borden wants to just beat the shit out of Kevin Knight. And Darby Allin's saying, hey, not yet. Not right now. Not yet. Is this something where they're going to start building Steve Borden possibly to be part of AEW's roster and go after Kevin Knight for the TNT Championship? And I'm not against it. I mean, if the guy can compete and he's starting to learn, I'm not against it, man, to be honest with you, because this is something that AEW needs to do. If they want to stay around for the next 10, 15 years, you need to start building the younger talent. Guys like Kevin Knight, guys like Darby Allin, guys like Steve Borden, Fletcher, Takeshita. These guys are going to be the future of this business if you guys want to stick around for the next 10, 15 years. 100%. And he already has names that are already trademarked for Borden, so yeah. I'm all for it. I'm all for building up the younger talent and making them stars, man. Look at Kevin Knight. Became TNT champion, turned heel. He became a star. You can do the same thing for Steve Borden. Or Steve Borden Jr. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with that being said, that I thought the show last night was great? No. I didn't think the show was all that. Like I said earlier in the show today, that a lot of it was Don Callis' family. Like, no one else was a part of the show. Everybody else took the day off. I don't know. I believe that Tony Khan writes this show 2 hours before they go on air. Genuinely. He's either walking around drinking 6 or 7 cups of coffee, a couple Red Bulls, maybe a couple White Claws, and he's like, oh, you know what? Maybe this idea will work. Last night's show sucked. And the Dynamite episodes have been shitty for the past couple weeks. Besides AEW Grand Slam in Mexico. Their weekly episodic television, bro, it struggles, man. It's absolutely struggles. There's no captivating television. There's no captivating storylines. There's no storyline progression. It's just not there. It's not. And the thing of it is, bro, they have to. We're all well aware that everybody on AEW can wrestle. That's their whole thing. This is the best we're the best wrestler. We all are well aware of the talent that's in that locker room. The fans are just asking for captivating storylines. The when, the where, and the why. And at one time in the first, 3 years of AEW's existence, they had no problem telling captivating stories and leaving you with cliffhangers for the next week's episode of Dynamite. What the fuck happened to that? What happened to that? I'll tell you exactly what happened with that. Once they got that new TV rights deal they just got, when they signed, Tony Khan got lazy. That's exactly what happened, because it became a point, at that point, he knew that AEW was a Bible product. That he didn't have to bust his ass anymore and put the work in to make captivating television week in and week out. And because of that, the weekly episodic television episodes, they suffer. Dynamite suffers, man. That's just the way it is. That's why everybody on here will tell you, man, they're tired of sounding like a broken record, but the truth's the truth. When the show's good, I'll tell you when it's good. When it's bad, it's bad. And last night, it was horrible. You're trying to force this agenda with Kenny Omega turning heel. Man, I can give a rat's ass. Not for nothing, I feel like you're a day late and $1 short. To be honest with you, you wanted to heel, you have one in MJF. One of the best heels in the business, and you dropped the fucking ball and gave Kenny Omega the belt at Beach Break. Now we see MJF in a casino gauntlet match at All In at Wembley. Jesus Christ, man. You guys dropped the ball. You really dropped the ball. And somebody backstage fucked up. I'm sorry. I know some people are saying, oh, well, MJF said it was a great idea and that's what they wanted to do. Jesus Christ. Are you serious? For what? For what? Because Kenny Omega's at the tail end of his career? Come on, bro. Come on. Come on. Jesus Christ, man. Honestly, this title reign that Kenny Omega has, bro, for what it's worth, I can give a rat's ass about. Because to me, I know he should and probably will drop that belt to Will Ospreay at Wembley. But then you have to ask yourself, what's next after Wembley? You know what I mean? There's so many questions that go into Wembley and coming out of Wembley that's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out in roughly about 10 days for All In at Wembley Stadium. But man, they need some storyline. They need some build, something, because it's just not there. It's not there at all. I mean, I thought last night's episode of Dynamite was absolutely just boring. Something needs to change, man. They need to go back to telling some kind of captivating storylines to get the fans invested. We're all well aware that everybody there can wrestle. That's why they're there. We just want captivating storylines to get the fans invested in the product. And if AEW can do that, then, yeah, we're back to what it once was. A great wrestling company. But we need storylines. You need something that's captivating enough, or a moment, something to get the fans excited about AEW's product. And right now I just feel like it's not there, bro. And I'm going to be honest, too, before I get out of here, man. The build-up towards All In, I feel like it's just not there. It's just not there at all. For me personally, I just feel like the build-up, the lead-up going into All In this year, it's very lackadaisical, and it's just not there for me personally as a fan. And hopefully things change. Hopefully things get better going into next week. It's the go-home show. And hopefully things can get better for AEW going into All In next week. But so far, it's been a slow build-up for AEW's All In. But with that being said, though, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.